Okay, good afternoon. It's Pete, North Las Vegas. It's almost 85 today, so somebody's gone and switched the get hot switch here in North Las Vegas. That's the battery cable up at the starter solenoid that you're looking at. And I used an extra heavy duty 2-aught lug. And got the cable routed pretty well. It doesn't touch anything. It's got enough slack in it to where when the engine rocks just a tiny bit or whatever, it's not going to work the lugs and work hard in the cable and cause any failures over time. Where I have the light, that's the clip I installed on the oil pan to hold the center of the cable. And it comes up here underneath the fuel pump. Plenty of clearance there. I've got about a good inch of clearance. And up here it gets a little bit tight, but I can adjust that by the clamp on top, which I'll show you here in just a second. Okay, so down at the starter solenoid, I used a big heavy duty 2-aught lug because I'm running 2-aught battery cables. I know, being Captain Obvious. But anyway, I had an issue with this going flush, and I talked about this in I think video 2 of this going flush up against the solenoid lug because of the plastic insulator and the separators for the wiring. This lug was just too big to go flush on the lug. So what I ended up doing was I made my own standoff, and with this part here is just a basic coupler, and with a washer and a lock washer and spun on to the solenoid lug, I used up about half of it. This is 1 inch, so I used up about a ½ inch of threads. Then I took a piece of all thread and screwed that into the other side of the coupler, and that ended up being about ½ an inch also. And then I tightened this up really good, this nut to this, and that's when you're putting the battery cable on and the nuts, this isn't going to come loose or come apart. I snugged this up pretty good on the solenoid, not enough to break anything or crack the plastic, but I got this pretty snug. So anyway, I looked around online for a standoff, and I found some that I thought would work, but it was one of those deals where they want to sell you like 20 of them or 50 of them. And I couldn't find anybody selling this M8 metric standoff that I needed, M8 to M8. I found like M6 to M8 or M8 to M6, but just a standard, you know, male-female standoff, I couldn't find it. So I had to make my own, and I think actually this ends up being stronger than a machine standoff. You got your machine standoff here, and how much material do they leave here before they start the threads? You know, how strong is it there? I don't know. I think that what I made here is going to be a lot stronger because I'm getting a full ½ inch of thread engagement on this piece of all thread. So I think what I came up here with here is probably going to be stronger. Okay, so this is what's screwed on to the starter solenoid lug, and then like I said, that allowed me to get the big heavy duty 2-aught lug on flush, and that's what my battery cable's hooked up to. And then I also have the number 4 heavy duty lug going to the alternator. So that's how I rigged up everything down below on the starter. And yeah, this thing here is definitely overkill. Okay, so anyway, I got my thermal heat sleeving on the number 4 gauge, and this runs down here with plenty of clearance, but now I feel a lot better that I still have some heat protection on the cabling to the alternator. And this is my 200 amp mega fuse inside here. So anyway, everything's done down here except for the actual starting wire, which will be the purple wire off the GM harness. And I'll probably run that behind here, and I'll put some sleeving on that also. Okay, so back to this clamp that I used for my battery cables. I was kind of having trouble finding, you know, what I wanted that way too. And I thought about just using some, what we called these in the Navy was Adele clamps. I don't know what these are actually called, but that's what we call them, Adele or Adele clamps. And to me, that was just not going to be a very finished look. To places where nobody's going to see it, then I don't mind using those. So I was trying to come up with a way to do this that had a much cleaner install. So what I did was I took these hose separators, and this is a 5/8 inch, and this fits the battery cable kind of loosely. You can see a lot of daylight in there. But what I found is if I took some heavy walled heat shrink and put that around the battery cable, then this became a nice snug fit. So what I did on the for the positive, I put the heat shrink on, and that's clamped down pretty tight. On the negative cable, I left this loose. So I want it to be a little bit loose because as the engine moves around, I don't want to flex that lug down there. I want this cable to be able to move a little bit. And so like I said, the positive is clamped down snug, and this is just kind of loose inside the hose separator. So I'll show you what I came up with to mount this to the inner fender. And worked out pretty good. So let me get this camera set up on the tripod, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so here's kind of a close-up of how I did the clamp. And I just stuck a couple of washers behind the clamp to suck up the bolt that I used. It was a little too long. I could have trimmed the bolt instead of using the washers, but the washer gave me kind of a big flat mounting base onto the inner fender. And here's what it looks like inside the fender. Okay, so I know most of you guys out there already know most of this stuff, but this is just your basic hose separator, and it's just kind of used to keep your hoses separated and keep them kind of contained. They're not generally mounted to anything. They're just meant to keep your hoses separated. But anyway, I ended up using them as a clamp, and I'll show you what I did. This is how they come, and this is a 1/4-20 on this Earl's. And so what I did was I got rid of the short bolt. This is going to be the top. And what I did was I came in through the bottom, and I threaded a bolt in through the bottom, because the Earl's clamps are threaded all the way through. Okay, so then what that allowed me to do was to sandwich this with a washer on this side between the fender. And then this allowed me to put the longer bolt through here and put a nut and a washer on here. So this is how I sandwiched it between the fender, and kind of changed the configuration around to clamp my battery cables. So anyway, so that's how I changed this thing around. So anyway, we're going to call this alternator battery cable alternator. This is part 3, and we're going to call this this little project pretty much done. I still have to get my terminals swedged on for the battery, and then probably today I'm going to mount my radiator overflow catch can right here. And I wanted to use an OEM. 1971 Camaros did not come with a radiator overflow catch can. They just had a hose that ran down to the ground, and then it was up to you to make sure that you didn't lose too much radiator fluid. But anyway, I took a 72 or 73 catch can, but it was so big because of the way I routed the battery cables, it wasn't going to be able to fit in here. So I'm just going to go with the Be Cool catch can, and that's probably going to be mounted right in here somewhere. So anyway, like I said, that concludes battery alternator battery cabling. Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out.